Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's Thrive by 5 and Berry Street event. My name is Michael Perisco and I'm CEO of Berry Street. I'll just wait for everyone just to come in. And if you can just see the note down the bottom, please, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please do it through the chat function and use the chat function throughout the evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we're meeting tonight, right across the country. I'm on the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. At Berry Street, we believe that children, young people and families should be safe, hopeful and thriving. It defines our purpose, reflects our 140-year history and guides our future. That's why we're excited to be partnering with Thrive by 5 and the Minderoo Foundation on tonight's event and, of course, the campaign more broadly. We've got a great lineup for you tonight. So over the next hour, we'll talk about and explore how the experiences of trauma, neglect and family violence impact on children's ability to learn and how reform in Australia's early childhood education system can support children and young people recovering from trauma to achieve their full potential. So firstly, we'll hear from Ingrid Stitt, who is the Minister for Childhood Education in the Victorian government. We're then going to have a panel of experts in trauma-informed approaches from Berry Street, and that panel are very keen to answer your questions. So when we get to that point, I'll encourage you to put questions up in the chat so that we can put them to our panelists. And finally, we'll hear from Weatherill, who's the CEO of Thrive by 5 and as many of you would know, is also the former South Australian Premier. Just a couple of introductory comments. As highlighted on the Thrive by 5 website, according to AEDC data, over 21% of Australian children enter primary school in a developmentally vulnerable state. This places a large proportion of children on a precarious trajectory. We also know that the 2016 South Australian Royal Commission into Child Protection found that 1 in 4 South Australian children will come to the attention of the child protection system before the age of 10. In 2019-20, Victorian Child Protection received over 122,000 reports to child protection. Pretty sobering figures. We also know that this group of children are not attending and engaging in early childhood education in high numbers, and we have to consider what needs to change in order to improve this. We need to look at the structure and nature of early childhood education and also look at how families can feel safer and more supported to bring their children there. Quality, affordable and accessible early childhood education is a key ingredient to addressing disadvantage and helping children and families to thrive. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, so let's get straight into it. I'd like to firstly introduce the Honourable Ingrid Stitt. As I said earlier, Ingrid is the Minister for Early Childhood Education here in Victoria. Minister Stitt was elected to the Victorian Legislative Council at the 2018 election, and in September 2020 was sworn in as the Minister for Workplace Safety, along with Minister for Early Childhood in the Andrews Labor government. Minister Stitt is passionate about education being the great leveller, and as Minister for Early Childhood, she is continuing the government's rollout of 3-year-old kinder across Victoria. So thank you, Minister Stitt, for being a part of tonight's event, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks very much, Michael, and good evening, everybody. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land that we're all dialing in from tonight, and for me, it's the land of the Wurundjeri people. Pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging, and extend my respect to any elders and Koori people who are joining us tonight. I'm really delighted to be able to take part in this discussion tonight, hosted by Berry Street, a very well-respected organisation committed to protecting children and families, many of whom are the most vulnerable in our society. Michael, the work that you and your team do in working with children experiencing trauma because of abuse, neglect or adverse experiences is absolutely critical. And like myself, Berry Street believes that early intervention and prevention ensures that children of Victoria get access to the very best start in life. I also congratulate the Minderoo Foundation on launching the Thrive by 5 campaign and for bringing together a really diverse group of stakeholders to work towards improving early childhood education across the country. And I'm looking forward to discussing potential opportunities to work together to improve outcomes, not just in Victoria, but across the country. As part of making Victoria the education state, we're making kindergarten bigger, better and fairer to improve outcomes for all Victorian children. I've got some slides to go through tonight, so I might get the next slide up if that's possible. We all know that 2 years of kindergarten are better than 1, and our collective commitment means we're working to ensure Victoria's most vulnerable children benefit from that universal offering. Kindergarten is an important step for young children and is an integral part of the education system in Victoria. Research shows that kindergarten improves children's health and well-being, helps them to develop strong social skills and encourages a love of learning. We also know that children who go to a kindergarten program start school much more confident and independent. High quality kindergarten programs offer children a range of learning experiences and activities that are both stimulating and fun. And children's learning and curiosity is encouraged through experiences and activities such as exploring the natural world, being exposed to new ideas and solving problems. These things are fundamental for the development and growth of all children, but can make a real difference to those children who are vulnerable. Australian research shows that 1 in 5 Victorian children start school developmentally vulnerable. Once behind, they obviously tend to stay behind. So the work that the department in Victoria is doing aims to reduce the impact of educational disadvantage on children's learning and development, and to improve the outcomes in communication, well-being and access and participation. Importantly, as a COVID response measure for part of 2020 and for the full 2021 year, we've introduced free kinder, and this will help ensure that all children can experience the benefits of kindergarten. If I can just go to the next slide. The rollout of 3-year-old kindergarten in 15 additional local government areas in Victoria in 2021 has been a success, building on what was achieved last year with the rollout in the initial 6 LGAs. We'll just pop over to the next slide. Across the 2021 rollout areas, we have 137 services of a possible 154, so that's quite a good uptake, delivering a funded 3-year-old program. So that means that there's around 2,000 additional 3-year-olds enrolled in funded kindergarten this year, each of whom will benefit from 2 years of play-based learning. And in Victoria, in terms of our rollout of this reform, most of those children are in regional Victoria. In terms of infrastructure, the government is investing $1.68 billion to ensure that new early childhood infrastructure is delivered when and where it's needed to support the rollout of this reform. To provide a clear picture of kindergarten demand and infrastructure needs across the state, the department is jointly developing kindergarten infrastructure and services plans, or KISPs, with our local government partners. And we have had great progress to date, and discussions have commenced with all local governments, and agreements have been reached in 43 municipalities, with the remainder on track to be wrapped up this year. We're also making progress in planning and delivering infrastructure to support the early years of the reform through our Building Blocks Grants program, which raised the level of government co-contribution to infrastructure projects, and the Kindergartens on School Sites program. The first 6 kindergartens on school sites are on track to commence operation in Term 1 2022, helping parents to ditch that double drop-off and supporting children to transition to primary school when they attend a kindergarten program on school grounds. So part of ensuring that infrastructure is used efficiently is ensuring families know where they can access a Victorian government approved program. So the new KinderTick initiative, launched in February this year, does this. It supports families to find a program that meets their needs, whether this is a traditional kindergarten setting or in long day care. In terms of our workforce, the government is taking a dual track approach to supporting services to recruit teachers and educators to offer a 3-year-old kindergarten program. And this means a focus on rapid solutions to support workforce supply and recruitment for next year, while also continuing to build the pipeline of future early childhood teachers. And this is obviously a key part of the 3-year-old kindergarten reform. For service providers that need to recruit new staff in 2022, a suite of recruitment supports, including financial incentives and recruitment agency support, will be made available. We're continuing to encourage individuals to enrol in an early childhood teaching qualification, with more than 1,900 scholarships awarded since October 2018. And we hope that we will soon see the impact of that investment in the sector. I recently announced an opportunity for early childhood educators to undertake an accelerated Bachelor of Early Childhood Education at Deakin University, with generous financial and support and student support available. This accelerated program will help educators with the support of their employers to become fully qualified early childhood teachers from mid-2022, and has actually received huge interest to date. We're also developing an early childhood workforce strategy. A policy paper will be released by the department soon. Consultation with the sector on a public-facing workforce strategy will commence soon after that, and run through till June this year. So I encourage all interested parties in the sector to provide any feedback they have in relation to our workforce strategy. If I just go to the next slide, please. I just want to talk a little bit about our school readiness funding, or SRF. It's a needs-based funding approach for services that deliver a funded kindergarten program, and it aims to address the effects of educational disadvantage on children. 2021 is the final year of the SRF 3-year-old rollout plan, with the funding now available to approximately 2,600 kindergarten services across all 79 local government areas in Victoria, reaching approximately 82,500 children. SRF is a permanent and ongoing part of the kindergarten funding model, and provides Victorian kindergarten services with access to programs and support to enhance children's learning and development. Kindergarten services receive anywhere from $1,000 to over $200,000, depending on the number of enrolments and the level of educational disadvantage. The menu of evidence-informed programs and supports. The menu was developed to help kindergarten services spend the majority of their SRF. The menu includes information on a range of programs and supports that have been externally validated for how well they support children's learning and development. So there's 31 approved menu items which focus on supporting vulnerable children. And this includes items related to allied health support available to kindergarten services, occupational therapists, speech pathologists and psychologists, allied health professionals work in collaboration with the educators and families to build on existing skills to improve the outcomes for those children. And 11 of the menu items have a focus on building a trauma-informed practice. In 2020, 30% of kindergartens access menu items related to trauma-informed practice, and these included Australian Childhood Foundation's Understanding and Responding to Stress and Trauma in the Early Years, which includes workshops about trauma-informed practice and aims to build the capability of services to support children who have experienced or are experiencing trauma. Alana and Madeline Foundation Early Years Trauma Consultancy Service, which aims to support educators in understanding and working with children whose lives have been affected by trauma, and support educators to provide safe and supportive learning environments for traumatised children. Kids First Trauma-Informed Training and Consultancy, which aims to equip educators with the tools they need to support children's social and emotional needs before they transition to school. We know that early sustained participation in a high-quality kindergarten program benefits all children, but that children experiencing vulnerability have the most to gain out of a universal program. So can I just go to the next slide, please? The data shows that early intervention is increasing the numbers of Aboriginal children, both 3 and 4-year-olds, participating in kindergarten. The next slide is similarly, participation by children known to child protection is increasing, but we've still got a lot more work to do to get that figure, that participation figure, much higher than it currently is. So we're doing quite a bit of work at the moment about some targeted programs in that area, and hope to be able to say more about that in the near future. This is why we have a number of targeted interventions for children with complex needs resulting from trauma. The direct support to children and families complements that SRF, which takes a service level and capacity building approach. For over a decade, Aboriginal children and children known to child protection have been able to access 15 hours of teacher-delivered kindergarten through the Early Start Kindergarten program in Victoria. In 2021, eligibility for this program was extended to children from a refugee and asylum seeker background. And access to early learning is an effective and targeted early intervention program that enables 3-year-old children from families with complex needs to fully participate in high quality universal early education and care. Referrers identify children from families with a minimum of 2 relevant characteristics, including a background of child protection involvement, intellectual or physical disability, family violence, mental health issues, and alcohol and drug abuse. AEL facilitators are the conduit between the home and early childhood setting. They develop trusting, respectful relationships with parents that have often experienced complex trauma. And parents build confidence and skills in providing an enriching home learning environment, as well as supporting their child's ongoing enrolment in formal learning settings. AEL facilitators apply a trauma-informed lens to their practice, drawing on appropriate strategies in working with educators to build their capacity to be more inclusive of vulnerable children and families. Another targeted intervention is the Early Childhood Lookout program, which supports the participation of children in out-of-home care in early childhood education and care services. In the 2021 state budget, we've invested additional funding to expand the Early Childhood Lookout program to meet additional demands as a result of the coronavirus, and to provide tailored support for children with complex needs resulting from trauma. This additional funding will expand the number of early childhood learning advisor positions from 10 to 20 across the state. And a number of other targeted interventions have been funded in direct response to the impacts of COVID-19, including outreach workers to support the engagement of Aboriginal children and children from a culturally and linguistically diverse background in kindergarten. Just to wrap up, the panel assembled here tonight for the Q&A sessions brings together some great minds in the sector. led by Annette Jackson, Executive Director, Statewide Services, Berry Street, and Alison Cox, Director of Take Two. And I know the discussion will cover some difficult issues, but I also know that together, through sharing our knowledge, information and experience, we can build a better future for these children and their families. Once again, I just want to thank you for inviting me this evening, and really looking forward to hearing the other speakers and the panel discussion. You've certainly got the expertise and experience in understanding firsthand the benefits of a trauma-informed approach to early childhood and development. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Minister. Really appreciate that overview. I think it is fair to say, I hope I'm not going to offend any of our participants from around the country, or indeed our international participants tonight. I notice we've got someone from Ireland, that Victoria is leading the way in terms of the 3-year-old kinder initiative, and it's certainly exciting work that you have ahead of you in your portfolio to realise that vision in the way that we all would like to see it realised. I think just a couple of points out of the presentation. I think the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participation rates in the 3-year-old kinder were growing at a really nice rate, and the 4-year-old kinder was fantastic. And I think while you're right, the figures in relation to kids in child protection, 42% participation rate, that's a 33% increase in the last 2 years, which is really impressive and a wonderful foundation to move forward from. So really some really encouraging developments there, and realising what we all knew was possible in terms of the gift of the 3-year-old presentation. Now, I've just been asked to remind everyone on the line that this evening is being taped and will be available on the Berry Street website along with the Thrive by 5 website. So just a reminder there. I'd now like us to move to the panel discussion that the Minister flagged earlier. So we have 3 panellists from Berry Street tonight, each renowned experts and researchers in trauma-informed practice. So first of all, we have Annette Jackson. Annette is adjunct professor, associate professor at La Trobe University. She's also the executive director of statewide services at Berry Street and has worked with infants, children, young people and their families for 35 years. She's widely published in peer-reviewed journals and books in the topics that relate to tonight's discussion. Give a little wave there, Annette.
Hi, everyone.
Then we've got Dr. Alison Cox. Alison, do you want to give a little wave there?
Hi, everyone.
So Alison is the director of Berry Street's Take Two program. Take Two is the statewide trauma service for child protection in Victoria. Alison has a doctorate in occupational therapy and a master's of child psychoanalytic psychotherapy, quite a mouthful, from Monash University. Her doctoral studies focused on evaluating children's play participation intervention. Alison has over 30 years of extensive experience in early childhood services, developmental assessment and child and adolescent mental health services. So great to have Alison on board. And last but not least, we've got Dr. Tom Brunzell. Tom has experience, where are you, Tom? You want to give a little wave?
Hello, everybody.
Beautiful. So Tom is a teacher, he's a school leader, he's a researcher, an education advisor. So varied experience. He's the Director of Education at Berry Street and is also an honorary fellow at the University of Melbourne Graduate School of Education. Tom presents internationally on topics relating to transforming school culture, whether that be student engagement, trauma-aware practice, wellbeing and positive psychology. So a great panel, a very knowledgeable panel with us tonight. And we're really encouraging some questions from the floor of our panel. So if you would like to do that, please put a question in the chat session. Annette, why don't you kick us off? And I think it's worth exploring why not enough families who are experiencing disadvantage are engaging in early childhood education. How can we improve this?
Well, I think it's I think there'd be a number of things to consider when we think about why, when we're offering something that we know is a positive experience, why people may not all take that up. And firstly, you'd have to look at whether or not they have a reason to believe that what is being offered is the right thing for their child and for themselves. And what we know is a lot of families have learnt through very bitter experience that people outside of their network may not be trusted, and this might be because of their own experience of family violence, their childhood experience of trauma. Particularly, we know very sadly for generations what our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families have learnt about professional services, and people who say, trust me, I know what's best for you and your family. So I think that just puts a real emphasis on our need, not only to provide the services that Minister Stitt has spoken about and that Berry Street and other organisations provide, but also how we have to do it with authenticity and really following up on doing what we say we're going to do, and also repairing, acknowledging when we do it wrong, and being really willing to engage with parents, extended family members, broader community members, and listening to what they are telling us they need.
Great, thank you. Tom, let's talk about specialist trauma-centered therapeutic support in the early childhood education space. What does it look like? What does it have to offer?
We love to think of our work as providing strategies, and strategies that both validate the hard work in early childhood staff that we've had certainly the privilege to support, the intuitive way many of them want to work. And what we find is that they really benefit when learning a consistent nomenclature or a literacy around these strategies. And they also benefit when we begin to speak about the values that Annette has just introduced to the conversation. We think a lot about self-regulation, as the literature would suggest we do. And we are often considering how little ones, when they're supported through co-regulation, when an adult is very deliberately doing their best to create connection through a relationship and all the other things that our early childhood educators are trying to do well, people feel more successful, and that's our goal.
Alison, how does the trauma that some of the young children in the early childhood setting that they've experienced, children who've experienced trauma, how does that play out in the early childhood setting, both for them and their experience, but also for others working with them?
Thanks, Michael. We know that when children have experienced traumatic experiences and adverse life events, that it often they happen within the core relationships in their life, so within their family network often, and this really impacts significantly on the trust that they experience and the sense of safety. And so this means that when they go into an environment with other adults that they need to invest trust in, that sometimes that can be significantly impacted. So it makes it hard for them to trust that adults will be safe, that they'll be predictable, and that the responses that they will provide to the children will be respectful of their wishes and their emotional state. So, and then I guess the other component that we see for children is often because of that lack of safety that they experience, it impacts on their ability to explore their environment, to feel safe to play, and unfortunately sometimes unsafe to speak. And so then we start to get all of the impacts on children's development. So how that might manifest in a childcare environment is that they might be a child who is developmentally delayed compared to their peers. And absolutely Minister Stitt, with her investment in early childhood, is really trying to raise the bar there for those children, which is fantastic. But also it might mean that they may not have the means to express their feelings in a way that is productive to great relationships in that kindergarten environment. They may fall back on their tried and true ways to try and get their needs met, which might be problematic within that group setting for the others that are around them.
Yeah, thanks. Tom, back to you. I'm interested if I'm a early childhood educator and working with at least a portion of young children who have experienced that trauma, what does the training of the sort that we provide at Berry Street, what skills does that equip me as a worker with?
As Minister Stitt's presentation and messages told us the importance of healthy play and play-based education. And so many of the staff that we get to work with will say, we want to set up environments for this to happen. But as many of us have spoken tonight have shared, many children are not yet ready to play for the entire time that they're supposed to. And so what happens is in healthy ways. So what happens often is teachers and staff members become a little bit perplexed as to what happens when ruptures occur. And so we spend a lot of time helping educators understand the cycle of rupture and repair. And absolutely, there are so many things that staff members can do to spot micro moments when they are happening or about to happen, and ways that we can support the young people to, as Allison just said, to begin to build a language to express themselves. And for many young people, they're not ready yet to express themselves in healthy ways. And so we want educators to understand that, and then of course have effective strategies to build that ability to repair in developmentally appropriate ways.
And just to extend that, what type of environment are you trying to create within an early learning centre?
Oh, that's a big question, Michael.
I get to ask the questions, the big ones.
Tonight, I'll tell you something that we shared with one of our communities very recently. We love the idea of positive priming to really help educators understand that our little ones must be held in communities of unconditional positive regard. And that positive priming occurs when it starts with a deliberate smile and a deliberate connection immediately to families, carers, and parents and children when they enter the door. And that positive priming primes the adults and the staff. And so we want educators to deliberately think, what am I doing to spark a strengths-based moment for every child that they see? And that it puts a little credit in the bank for lots and lots of things later on that could happen in the day.
Alison, back to you. What is the benefit? The medium, the longer term benefit for the young kids that we're talking about to address the trauma, to adopt a trauma-informed approach in this early childhood setting?
I think it's there in the title of the advocacy piece that we're all involved in. It's about helping children to be able to thrive, to grow and thrive. We know that, unfortunately, on the flip side, that for children who struggle in the ways that we've described already, that the longer term outcomes aren't fabulous, that there is a really high proportion of people who go on to have mental illness, homelessness, and to struggle educationally for all of their lives. So on the flip side, investing in early childhood education, in helping children to feel safe and strong in their relationships and in themselves, enables them to be able to play. And it's through play that children learn, but you need to be safe to be able to play. So we need to give safety through relationships, through valuing the individuals like Tom's talked about, and that will enable the children to play, to learn, to feel safe in their relationships, and to go on to be able to thrive and be fully contributing members of our community in the way that they wish to be.
Thanks, Alison. And Ed, a tricky question here. You're one of the foremost experts on trauma in Australia, so I feel comfortable throwing this at you. But
great.
What are a couple of myths in relation to trauma or trauma-informed practice that mean that we actually make things worse or just not better?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of myths, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic. For example, there are some who would say, and I've heard this and read this, that young children are not impacted by trauma as much as adults because they're too naive to know what's happening to them, and so they're protected. In fact, how often might we have heard at a dinner party or at the hairdresser, oh, it was terrible, but thank goodness the baby was too young to understand. And of course, what we know is that, yes, there are times when the young child just won't be exposed to the trauma because the adults have been able to wrap around that young child and really buffer them from that experience. But what we also know is that they will receive exponentially greater impact via the adults if the adults are not regulated. So if the adults are, stressed up to 10, the child in their care will go up even higher. It's a magnification. The other thing we know is that whilst trauma can impact on anybody, and fortunately not everybody, but anybody, it can impact on our brain in terms of the way we function. If God forbid there was, a massive event now and we all, jumped and were horrified, our brains would adapt in order to help us to function in that environment. What we know for young children is that it's not only going to impact on their functioning, but it can also impact on their developmental pathways from that event onwards. And so without that opportunity for recovery and repair, both in their day-to-day micro moments, as Tom has talked about, and also sometimes with direct therapy, either usually through a clinician such as through Take Two, in working with the child's safe adult and the child together, then that pathway can really steer them into the kinds of futures that Alison has spoken about. So that's kind of a major myth.
Thank you. I knew it was safe to throw to you on that one. We've got a question from Rosie in the chat, and I'm going to direct this one to Tom Brunzell. Navigating the early childhood sector can be challenging. Are there ways that professionals in child and family services that are coming in contact with, sorry, my screen has, I'm having trouble reading you wouldn't believe it. I got an email right at the time when I was reading out the question. Are there ways that professionals in child and family services that are coming into contact with families can be better supported to facilitate engagement with early childhood education? Having read that, I think that's probably a better one for you, Alison.
It's definitely for Alison.
You, Jay, there, so we'll come to you in just a moment.
Okay, I'll be quick because I can see Jay is waiting there. I was really interested in what the Minister talked about in terms of the kindergarten tick program, because it's not one that I've actually heard about, so I've noted it down to investigate because I wondered if that's kind of a bit of a navigator role as well. But I think there does need to be very warm engagement, very warm referral, and sometimes that may take quite a while, as Annette was saying. Some of the people that we work with have a very good reason to be distrustful, and we absolutely need to authentically gain trust and take a very client-centered, curious approach as to what might be the barriers or the fears for the people that we're working with that might be preventing or getting in the way of the engagement. So I think we need to start with being curious and wondering why, and applying the trauma-informed approach from the very beginning of our engagement, including with the parents.
Thanks very much, Alison, and thank you to our three panelists tonight for sharing their wisdom and their experience with us. So if you can join me in a virtual round of applause for Annette, Alison and Tom. Thank you again. A really thought-provoking discussion on a really important topic. If any of the discussion that we're having tonight is triggering for you, in the chat, we've just put up some numbers for Lifeline and the Family Relationship Advice Line, just as a resource there. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is some pretty serious matters. And at the end of the day, we're talking about the future of the most vulnerable kids in our community. So please avail yourself of those resources if you need to. Our final speaker tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the Honourable Jay Weatherill. Jay was the 45th Premier of South Australia and was Minister for Early Childhood Education prior to becoming Premier. So, Minister Stitt, it seems to me that as Minister for Early Childhood here in Victoria, you're on the fast track to premiership.
Well,
so keep that in mind.
I'm in the upper house, Michael. So
damn it! I'm sure there's always a safe seat you can go to, Ingrid.
We have a very good Premier already.
True, very true. Jay's now retired from politics, obviously, and is CEO of the Thrive by 5 campaign, which is supported by the Minderoo Foundation, and we've talked about that tonight. Jay's known as a person who is impatient with the pace of reform, and mainly that's because he knows what an efficient and effective early childhood development system can look like, and wants to get to that point as fast as possible. So thanks so much for joining us from Western Australia tonight, Jay, or afternoon in your case. I thought I'd get the conversation started with a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you, Michael. I'm coming to you from Adelaide, actually. I'm back here for the week. So I'm back on Kaurna land here in Adelaide. So it's not quite breakfast time over in Perth, as it usually is whenever we meet. And I should acknowledge my colleague, Minister Stitt. So acknowledgements to you, Minister, and to everybody that's joining us.
Thanks, Jay. So, Jay, I think one of the questions that I know I asked you when we met, and I think it would be on the tips of everyone's tongue, is you were appointed CEO of Thrive by 5 about a year ago. Have had a illustrious career, a very successful career in politics, and you would have had numerous opportunities to pursue when you stepped down from being Treasurer. Tell us what drew you to Thrive by 5, except obviously the Western Australian weather. What Thrive by 5 that attracted you?
Well, I suppose that, like a lot of people on this call, I arrived at the view that if you're interested in shifting the dial on disadvantage and making a difference to the world, the single most important way you can do it is to invest in the first 5 years of life. And that became really obvious to me in the course of my work. But we had the benefit in South Australia of two really powerful thinkers. That we had this program called Thinkers in Residence. We brought out two magnificent thinkers. One was a bloke called Fraser Mustard, who switched us on to the neuroscience of the way in which a child's brain develops in the first 5 years from Canada. And another wonderful woman, a woman called Carla Rinaldi, who comes from Reggio Children, a little town in northern Italy that has a philosophy of early learning, which is in a very different approach, a philosophical approach, but really arriving at the same conclusion from two very different perspectives. And they were very powerful influences on my thinking and have stayed with me ever since. And so after politics, I was volunteering in this field, doing a few bits and pieces, and then this opportunity came up to effectively carry this agenda forward. And while I had a bit of a crack at it at a public policy sense in our work, and we'd done some good things in South Australia, and we tried to do some things on the national agenda, I felt that there was very much more that needed to be done, and felt this was an opportunity to try and get it done, basically.
And can you break it down for us? What is Thrive by 5 trying to achieve? What's the end game?
Well, it comes from an analysis that really is that, I mean, everybody here knows about the importance of the first 5 years and the fact that we don't really have a coherent system of early childhood development. So that's the fundamental problem, and we all know that investing in the early years would be profound in terms of the health and learning and behavioural trajectory of children. But the question then becomes, I mean, we've got a legion of reports, that say this. So the arguments are impeccable. Why haven't we got change? And change here, the change we're talking about is change from governments, because most of the levers are held by governments. And, governments have got a lot of things on their plates. I mean, as Ingrid will tell you, like, there's so many important issues and they're all competing for attention. Why is our issue going to get to the top of the list? And I thought I knew how we can do that. And it's basically to run a campaign. You need more than just a good argument in politics. You need pressure for change. And to get pressure for change, you need a campaign. And for a campaign, you need a campaign goal. And our campaign goal is universal, high quality early learning system for this country, so that we've got a framework, a universal platform from which we can do all the important things that we need to do for children. And the reason why the universal platform is so important is that you can't help, especially for the children that we're talking about on this call, you can't find or help those children if you don't have a universal platform from which to reach them and their families. There's very much more that needs to happen than just the universal platform, but you need the universal platform. And the policy, the politics of this is that we can't start with the most disadvantaged children. We can't win a political argument just by talking about disadvantage. We can win a political argument if we talk about a universal system. And so, ironically, the safest measures politically are the boldest. So if we because a lot of people say, well, why don't you just talk about the children you want to help, the most disadvantaged? It's cheaper, it's more effective, and why don't we don't tell us we have to reform the whole system. But the truth is that we can't get the overwhelming majority of the community on side for this unless there's something in it for all of them. And there is something in it for all of them. Every child can develop and thrive and flourish more effectively if we have a system of this sort. Some children will need special help and have special needs, but everybody can get something, and some children can get more. And that's both the political argument, and also I think the evidence tells us it's the best system, because it's non-stigmatizing. It means that we don't miss people, and it means we can form relationships from which we can then provide, these targeted services. So, I think that's what our campaign is about.
Jay, the campaign also focuses on the quality of the service provided. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, quality is essential. I mean, you could get theoretically, you get a universal system where every child gets something, but if it's at low quality, you could find yourself going backwards. So this is, you can't, this argument goes hand in hand with quality. And you can't talk about quality without talking about some fundamental issues around the workforce and how they're valued and rewarded and supported. And that's a major issue in this area. And the workforce, when I talk about early learning, it's really a phrase which is meant to be an overarching phrase to cover nurses, teachers, social workers, really everybody that touches the lives of families and children in those first 5 years. And it's a very large and complex service system and doesn't even conceive of itself as one system. So the quality issues are really complex. They involve a common system of knowledge so that we all share an understanding about how children develop. There are important touch points about how each of these service systems relate and respond to each other. These are not trivial public policy challenges, but they're all crucial when they go to the question of quality.
And on the website and in discussions, we've talked about the different layers of government that are involved in early childhood, and the complexity of that. It would be worth hearing your reflections on that, particularly as an ex-premier, and what the campaign can do to bring greater coordination across those different levels of government.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, as I said, there are at least 5 service systems that swarm around this area, sort of childcare, preschool, child protection, community and family services, and infant and maternal health. And that's without even talking about all the allied health professions and all the adult services that indirectly affect the lives of children. So this is ferociously complicated. And it's made more complicated, but almost none of these services are in the same agency. They sit in different parts of government and even at different levels of government. And a really big, rich detail right in the middle of the system is what we currently call childcare, which was never really conceived as part of the early childhood development system, was really seen more as an incident of employment policy. And of course, that's controlled by the Commonwealth. So you've got lots of things darting off in different directions and not really, you know, no coherent sort of single service system. So how do you deal with this? Well, no one minister is ever going to be able to grapple with this. They don't have the authority. Like if you're the Minister for Child Protection, you can't be telling the Minister for Health what to do. And if the Minister for Education can't tell the Minister for Communities what to do. So it really rests with First Ministers, with Premiers and Prime Ministers. And fortunately, through COVID, we have a piece of architecture which is really well suited to this conversation, and it's the National Cabinet. And it's going to require somebody to put a big vision out there in front of us. Now, nobody's suggesting we're going to build this thing out overnight. It will require us to think about it and work it out over a period, because, you know, how do you take a Commonwealth demand-driven system and insert it into a state-based service system? How does that work? These are really difficult questions. How does it interact with all these episodic services which are provided by, say, disability services, which are sort of running almost like a voucher system? And how does it intersect with the multi-market model which is run in the childcare system? Very complex. But if you've got the vision of something, you know, and if you start with the vision, that is at the level of the neighbourhood, a place where a pram distance away from every family, a place where they can have all their needs met, and it's fully integrated, and that they don't have to worry about all these complex interactions. For them, what they see are these relationships where they get connected up with what they need as a family and as a child. That's a very powerful goal. And incidentally, it also means that those families, women more often than not, can then also participate in the world of work or whatever, community life, in a way which is fulfilling for them, but also having the needs of their children met. I mean, this is a really powerful vision which has got massive benefits for our nation, economically, socially, and and in terms of just the quality of our lives. So it seems to me that becomes the challenge, but it's going to require big thinking. It's going to require First Ministers, the Prime Minister, and Premiers to do this. So we're campaigning to, for each minister, each Premier or the Prime Minister themselves to put this on the National Cabinet agenda.
And how is that going? What makes you hopeful at this point?
A range of things. One is, I think COVID has revealed the weaknesses in the service system. So I think it's demonstrated that it's an essential service, but it's under pressure. And I think the other really powerful thing which has emerged is the whole question of female sort of empowerment, which is emerging, both in terms of their economic rights, obviously the rights that are being asserted by women about the way in which the world interacts with them is becoming a really powerful thing. And women are just not prepared to put up with the unequal treatment, both in the way in which work is shared, the way in which caring for children is shared, the way in which they're having to suffer disadvantage about their careers because of that inequitable sharing of the responsibility for children. And so, there's a really powerful groundswell of support for change in this area. And so my sense is that this is an agenda whose time has sort of arrived. There's always been quality arguments. There needs to be this pressure, and I think the pressure's building.
And Joe, is part of the pressure having discussions like this across the country, these town hall meetings? I know this is one of very many that Thrive by Five are having.
Absolutely. And it's about, we're trying to drive supporters to the campaign. So we've got a campaign website, thrivebyfive.org.au. So I'd really encourage people to go on and register. It's no obligation. It just tells you what's going on. I meet every week with a campaign group of about 40 people, which is growing, institutions from across all of the different service systems. Berry Street is represented on that group, and there's a whole range of other, whether it's unions or gender groups or even providers themselves like Good Start. So a whole broad range of people. The Nurses Federation just joined the campaign, the Independent Education Union, the Australian Education Union. Really quite a broad cross-section of civil society is joining this campaign. And so the more pressure we can put on the political process, the more likely it is we'll be heard.
Well said. Thanks so much, Jay, for speaking to us tonight. And once again, a virtual round of applause. And you're going to have to make sure that this round of applause includes Minister Stitt, because I didn't make sure we gave Minister Stitt a virtual round of applause as well. So to all of our speakers tonight, really appreciate it. I think it's wonderful to have been able to kick it off with the Minister here in Victoria who's in charge of rolling out exactly what we're talking about. I think that's brilliant. We had a wonderful panel, and then to hear the inspiring words from an ex-Premier taking on what is a significant challenge to get this rolling right across the country. And finally, thank you to all of you who have come along on a Thursday evening to be a part of this important discussion. As Jay said, Berry Street has signed up as a member. I would encourage all of you who are here tonight to sign up and be a part of what undoubtedly will be a strong movement that undoubtedly will have a significant impact on the lives of all young people across the country, but particularly the most disadvantaged. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a great evening. And once again, thank you to our speakers.